Kakheti is situated in the east of Georgia, extending to the watershed of the Caucasus. It is known that at least in the Middle Ages, this region provided a place of living for some Armenians from different parts of Armenia, who started living side by side with the native Georgians. In 1614 and 1617, most of the population of Kakheti was deported to the depths of Persia. In Trdat, for instance, the inhabitants of Gulistan and Hakhpat even founded their own quarters. However, living in Georgia, in a Georgian-speaking environment, even these newly arrived immigrants forgot their mother tongue after a generation, replacing it with Georgian. On a sunny day in May 2012, we set out for Kakheti. First, we visited the city of Trdat. As early as the end of the 19th century, it was one of those Caucasian cities that had a large Armenian population. Thus, in 1886, it had 11,000 citizens, 9,000 of whom were Armenians. The city has 3 standing Armenian churches, but we had enough time to see only one of them, and we gave preference to Trdat Yerodutyn, Holy Trinity Church, standing in a cemetery. It was built in 1866 with Gakho Todasyan's means. This benefactor's remains repose right in front of the western entrance of the church. South of the church, we saw the modest gravestone of military historian, meritorious educational figure, Rostom Bek Yerzgyants, who founded the Vardanian Armenian School in Trdat in 1860. The other remarkable tombstones of this graveyard belong to the members of the Kirkosyans, Mutikians, Sargisyans, Trsahakians, Trsargisyans, Bagdoyans, Bergijanians, Gabelians, Gegelians, Gevorgians, Todosians, Levarsabians, Hitarians, Ulukanians, Prodonians, and Ononians families, which mostly have Armenian epitaphs. It became evident to us that from among the tombstones of the Soviet years, those with Armenian epitaphs first became smaller in number and then could not be found at all. Instead, Georgian and Russian epitaphs could be seen there. We also noticed that in the last 2 decades, no Russian inscriptions were engraved there at all, the epitaphs of this period being only in Georgian. Thus, even these gravestones clearly show how the sense of national identity gradually faded away amidst the Armenians of Trdat.
Ցավոք միայն հին սերնդի մարդկանց քարերն են հայերենով պահված։ Ժամանակակիցները արդեն չկայմենալով հայերենով ավելի ժանան բացականացնում են։ Եվ գերեզմանում է նույն դրությունն է։ Նոր քարերը բոլոր շվիլիներով են։ Ցավոք։
Passing from one tombstone to another, we suddenly stopped in front of a gravestone belonging to the spouses Papian, granite tombstone of 1994, which bears a representation of Ekmiadzin Cathedral with an Armenian inscription reading, Holy Ekmiadzin. Is this not a revelation of their national identity and an unhidden manifestation of their anguish for their homeland and mother tongue? After midday, we reached the city site of Grim, once the capital of Kakheti. A guide willingly introduced us to the history of the city, which preserves 16 religious monuments, 15 of which are purely Armenian. This fact gives grounds for the supposition that until the deportations organized by Shah Abbas in the 1610s, Krim was just an Armenian city, whereas the guide never mentioned the word Armenian in his talk that lasted for an hour and a half. The restoration activities that started in Georgia in the late 1990s stripped many Armenian churches of their specifically Armenian features. Thus, for instance, their elevated bimas are leveled with the ground everywhere. However, what we saw in Pataloan's church, standing at the northern extremity of the city site, was simply formidable. It turned out that during its restoration, the 3 inscribed crossstones set in its western facade had been plastered with cement. Our next destination was the city of Steknach. We found the Armenian church of St. Gevorg occupied by Georgian clergymen, with its door locked. A little farther from the church, Armenian houses can be seen, including the paternal house of artist Gevorg Bashinjagian with a trilingual plaque. It was getting dark, but we wanted to see one more nearby monument at dusk. We chose the village site of Nasomkhar, located not far from Steknach, where the Armenians had the Jiman Surb Astvatsatsen church standing close to a cemetery. The very name of the former village, Nasomkhar, is very noteworthy. It is translated from Georgian as an Armenian inhabited place. While on the opposite side of the gorge, we already saw the church, which was adjoined by some wagon-like dwelling. We reached the church. It had been repaired. Sargis Darchinian immediately noticed that the graveyard he had seen west of the church in the 1990s had disappeared.
Ոչ միա, որ մասում էր։ Այս արևմտյան ճակատի դիմաց։
Երկու կողքը կա հետևանդ։ Շուտ կարող ձորնիկ ցինիկ է, դինայել։
We asked about the fate of the cemetery to one of the Georgian priests living in the wagon-like habitation. According to him, he was a refugee from Abkhazia. For the first time, we heard the absurdity that a monastery cannot have a cemetery. Probably, he just did not dare to say that a Georgianized monastery cannot have an Armenian cemetery. Anyway, this clergyman continued talking nonsense, the senselessness of his words being beyond sound reason. Allegedly, that cemetery had been established by the communists for believers not to come to the monastery. What about the fact that some of those tombstones were created even before Karl Marx's birth?
Мы сейчас пока время вот там внизу живем, в этом маленьком, а скоро будет здесь. Потом нашли кельи.
Тут были камни, большие камни в деревне, сказали.
Какие камни?
Ну, камни, надгробные камни.
Надгробные камни, эти камни потом перевезли, потому что эти камни, здесь было кладбище. Эти кладбища, когда делали коммунисты делали, потому что, чтобы церковь, да, вот, чтобы в церковь не ходили люди. А вообще кладбище нельзя, это монастырь.
At last we found a gravestone on a wooded slanting slope north of the church. As for the others, they seemed to have disappeared without any trace. It was the last vestige of the cemetery once extending around the parish church of the small Armenian inhabited village of Nasomkhar. Indignant at the vandalistic act of the Georgian clergyman, we left the church and started descending. And what should we see? The wagon-like dwelling, where the clergyman lived, stood on 6 gravestones that had been seized from the annihilated cemetery. So this is how the Georgian clergyman could use the gravestones, perpetuating the Armenians' memory. To be a Christian clergyman and destroy the cemetery of another Christian nation, labeling it as a communist one. Live on our gravestones, reduce the building material, and glorify God.